right, make sure that I am recording this as well. All right, make sure that I am recording this as well. Good, so we're live. We are recording. Right now, I'm not able to see the chat, but I'm just a few steps away. Thank you all for joining me here today. My name is Michael Williams, for those of you that don't already know that. And it is good to see you here again with me. Just a couple of logistical items. While you're coming in, if you would be so kind as to share with me where you're from or where you live now. And once again, we don't need your exact address or anything, but where you live, the country and the city, and also what you do for a living. That's very helpful. If you're a student, if you're a homemaker, that's fine. Just type that in. I do look at those things. Okay, so make sure that you can hear me. There are a couple of people here already. They said that they can hear me, so you should be able to hear me fine. I just did a test. So you should be able to hear and see me fine. If not, then you might want to check or restart. It may be something on your end. And one or two other items. If you have questions, I would prefer that you put them in something called the Q&A, the question and answer box. So there should be a little something on your screen somewhere where you can go in and enter your questions there. And what I'll do is towards the end, I'll go in and scroll back up to the beginning and begin to work through your questions. I prefer you not use the chat for questions. If you have comments, right? If you have comments, then that's okay for you to put the comments in the chat. But questions, try to put those in the question and answer box if that's visible on your device. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and jump right into this. Today, what we're talking about is something that is relevant to all of us. It's relevant to all of us. And that is when you and I are speaking or presenting, right? Not just making presentations, but when we're presenting, when we're speaking up in meetings, when we're talking to a prospective client or to a client, when we're on the phone, when we're in an interview, when we're just having a casual conversation, what can happen to not just you, but anyone, and I'll tell you what I mean by that, but what can happen is we can become distracted. We can become distracted and we can get inside of our own heads and lose sight of the conversation itself, lose sight of being present with that person. And we can become distracted with a whole lot of different things. And we'll talk about some of those things today. But what I want you to know is that it's not just people who struggle with their speech, it's people who struggle with stammering or stuttering who get distracted. This can happen to anyone, to anyone. And I know this because I'm doing a corporate training and there are people who they don't stutter, they have no problems with stutter, but they get distracted in the same way as you might get distracted. What happens to them often is that they lose track of what they're saying. Their minds get kind of foggy. They speak around in circles, right? It's hard for them to stay focused and stay on track. Sometimes they even begin to stumble over their words, to stutter, right? And these are people who don't stutter. So if it can happen to them, then of course it can happen to you, right? It can happen to us. So I want you to know that getting distracted and having this distraction mess with your speech and mess with your clarity and your articulation, mess with your confidence, can happen and does happen to virtually anyone, right? Now, what are some of the things that happen to us when we become distracted? Well, I just mentioned some of them. Would love to hear from you. If you can type into the little chat box there, what are some of the things that happen to you when you when you're speaking and you get distracted, what do you think about? And there's two primary times when people can become distracted. One is before they speak. Now, this can happen specifically and most often before a higher pressure speaking situation. And high pressure depends on you. For some people, high pressure is ordering coffee, talking on the phone, right? Being in a meeting and giving out their names. So this can be high pressure for some people. For other people, high pressure is like doing a presentation, standing up in a meeting, giving a report, asking a question in a meeting, an interview, if I didn't already mention it, giving a big presentation, defending your doctoral thesis, right? So all of these things can be high pressure. So there's two primary times when people can become distracted. One of those times is before, that is leading up to that experience. And the other is during, before and during. What happens to us when we become distracted leading up to a speaking situation? So I'd love for you to type in, what are some things that you think about, that you anticipate leading up to a speaking situation? Just type that in. I'll take a look at it in just a little while. Okay. So let's just run through a couple of things that can happen leading up to a speaking experience. So one thing is we can start to worry, right? We can start to become anxious about that speaking situation. So let's get real specific. And these are all things that either I've experienced myself or I've heard from people over the years. Let's go down something as simple as ordering coffee or ordering food. So some people avoid ordering coffee, or they don't get the coffee they want. They become very anxious when they know that they're going to go order some coffee or tea or whatever. Why? Because some people struggle with saying their name. So they know they're going to ask you your name. So you start anticipating, you start thinking about the fact that, I'm going to have to give my name. And I generally get stuck when I give my name, when I introduce myself, right? So that's one circumstance. So you start worrying about, you actually start feeling more anxious and nervous about ordering coffee or ordering food or going through the drive-through. Another situation, when you have to go to a training or a new class and you know that they're going to go around and ask you your name and what you do or where you're from, or tell us a little about yourself. So you're sitting there counting, okay, how many people do I have in front of me? I used to do this when it came to reading. I used to hate going to trainings, and they would say, okay, go ahead and open up your books. And what we're going to do here is we're going to have everyone just go ahead and read a paragraph, right? So I'm like, oh, crap. So then I'm counting. I'm like, okay, this guy's going to read this lady's going to read that, and then it's going to get to me. So I'm probably going to have to read this paragraph. And sometimes what would happen is something would happen and they would skip or they would do whatever, and I'd end up reading a different paragraph. So I'm sitting there getting anxious about having to read a paragraph. So same thing for some of you in terms of reading or just introducing yourself. All right. So then the anxiety builds, and sometimes it comes across well. Sometimes you're able to say it smoothly, and other times, because of the anticipation and the anxiousness, you actually get stuck, right? So those are just a couple of situations in which people can anticipate. What are some other bigger ones? Interviews, presentations, where you're there and you're thinking about this interview coming up. You're thinking about this presentation. And what are you thinking, right? So here's the thing. Whenever you have a speaking situation coming up, everyone's going to anticipate it to one degree or another. We're all going to be thinking about that speaking situation, that upcoming speaking situation. You have a presentation, you have an interview, and it's coming up. And so you're thinking about it. The only question is how you think about it. It's not whether you're going to think, it's how you think about it. You say, well, Mike, what do you mean by how I think about it? Well, you're going to anticipate the experience that's coming up. How you anticipate it. Do you anticipate it positively and constructively, or negatively and destructively? That is, do you worry about getting stuck? Do you worry about certain words that you might have a problem saying? Like if they ask you your school, they're going to ask you your name, or if they ask you your degree sometimes, or if they ask you this question and you have to say, oh, this is what I majored in, and I always have a problem saying my major, right? So we anticipate all those potential blocks, and then we start thinking about, okay, if they say that, then how am I going to say it? How am I going to get it out? What am I going to do? So we start thinking about that, and we just start getting more and more anxious, more and more worried, and we're thinking about the very thing that we don't want to happen. We're going to talk about why that's so powerful and why it's so powerfully destructive, right? And how you can take that same strategy, that same power that you have, and use it constructively and positively. So it's how you're anticipating, right? So we're talking about how, right? You are going to anticipate. The only question is how you do it. You can either worry about getting stuck, and you can worry about some other things, which we'll talk about. You can worry about not performing well. You can worry about what would happen if you don't perform well, how you might not get the job. You might embarrass yourself. People might think less of you. So you start worrying about those things, and we bring about the very thing that we're worried about. So that's one way when we talk about how. Okay. Now, let's take a look at what we focus on, what we think about during. So, right then, we just kind of talked about what happens before. We're all going to anticipate. And we just talked about when we anticipate, when we start thinking about something before, right? Now, let's talk about what we think about during a presentation, an interview, a conversation, while we're ordering coffee or whatever. So some of the same things, right? We start thinking about, okay, I hope I don't get stuck on this word. I hope I don't block on this word. We start thinking about the judgment of others, right? What are they going to think about me? What happens if I get stuck and I do something with my face or my mouth or whatever? Ooh, that's going to feel embarrassing. And then what are they going to think about me? Or if it's in a meeting or an interview or a presentation, or what are they going to think about? Will I get the job? Will they think there's something wrong with me? Will they know that I stutter, right? And then are they going to think I'm less intelligent because I'm not able to say what I want to say? So we start thinking about that judgment. Or in a meeting, you start thinking about your colleagues or your senior or the director or CEO. And ooh, if I raise my hand and I get stuck, what are they going to think about me? How is that going to impact my future? Right. So we start thinking about and anticipating those things while we're there in the situation. Okay. So what happens? What this does is this drains our energy, right? We become more tired in a sense, more anxious. We can also become more tense. Our breathing can become more shallow. We transition into fight or flight, in which case now our thinking brain, right, our frontal cortex or prefrontal cortex, all of a sudden begins to kind of shut down, and we start reacting and responding off of instinct, right? And so we're no longer really thinking clearly. Our mind starts getting cloudy, and then we are not able to articulate clearly what we want. We just all of a sudden we forget, we lose our memory. We forget what we want to say. So when these types of things begin to happen, it just reinforces what we've been worried about. Okay. So during a situation, these are some things that can happen to us. We can become cloudy. We can begin to stumble over our words. We can forget what we were going to say. Even though we practiced, we prepared, we did everything, we lose our focus, right? So before and during, this is what happens to people. What we're going to talk about today is I'm going to provide for you really one, but we can break it into two parts, if you will. There's two aspects or dimensions to this, uh, strategies, technique that you can use to help you stay focused on what you should. Now, this is so very important. Many of my webinars, we actually talk about specific speaking strategies like extending and blending and airflow linking and maintaining airflow and all of that. And those are all very, very important, right? But there's a psychological dimension to speaking well, and to speaking smoothly and confidently. And that comes down to this very thing right here. It's focus. Focus. What are you focused on leading up to, and what are you focused on during a speaking experience? So very important. I can't tell you how many people I've worked with, and I survey them, that when they're in a speaking situation, I ask them, well, what did you think about? What did you, oh, I thought about, I hope I don't stutter. I hope I don't stutter. I thought about the fact that I know I'm going to get stuck on this word. I know they're going to ask me, or I thought about what they were thinking of me, right? So we know that this happens. There's been a lot of research. There are two books that I want to encourage you to get. I encourage you to get an Audible account, Audible, Audible, so you can listen to these books as an audio program, but you can also read them, obviously. One book is called The Performing Under Pressure, How to Perform Under Pressure, Performing Under Pressure, I think the name is. The other book is called Presence. And I'll try to send this out in an email, but if you look up Presence, you look up Performing Under Pressure. And in the book Performing Under Pressure, he references this book called Presence. And I just got this book Presence about a week ago. Performing Under Pressure, I've had about a year. But if you research those books, if you look in there, I mean, virtually everything in there supports the Pro 90 speech system. And I just want to let you know that the Pro 90 speech system predates those books, right? So we've been working on this stuff before those books came out. But you're going to, if you look at and you read Performing Under Pressure, you'll think that I took it right out of that book, because everything in there, all of the research, and they give you so much more research than I do, right? That's not my goal, is to give you all the research. They give you a lot of research and examples, and they're just excellent resources and supplementary material to the work that you and I are doing together. So I mean, I learned from it. And so I strongly recommend for you to get those books. Like, they should be parts of your Pro 90D library. Performing Under Pressure and Presence, both great books. So now let's get back to it. The reason that I mention those books is because one of the things that they talk about is focus, right? And what we focus on when we're in a speaking situation. So in this webinar, I'm going to give you a couple of strategies for you to focus on before you speak and while you're speaking. So I had two friends whose names are Vic and Rick. They helped me improve my speaking skills by teaching me this really cool trick. They said when you're presenting to keep your focus on Vic, but when you're having conversations, shift your focus to Rick. Okay, so we're going to talk about, and don't worry if you can't see this. Some of you will be able to see this fine, others may not. We're going to talk about something you may have heard me mention before. You probably never heard me talk about Rick, but you probably have heard me just touch on Vic. And these are things that you can use to trigger. These are things that you can focus your thoughts. I'm going to give you some very specific things to tell yourself. It's not just enough for me to say, focus on this, shift your focus. How do you do it? How do you focus when you have something coming up, an interview, a presentation, a meeting, getting coffee or whatever? How do you keep your focus on what you need to have it focused on and keep it off of what you don't? If you're in a conversation, how do you keep your focus? How do you articulate clearly? How do you be precise and concise? That's what we're going to talk about today. So I would strongly advise you to get something to write on. Definitely you want to watch this again, because this is so very powerful. This doesn't just apply to speech. This can apply to everything, anything you do in life. How do I know it? Because the research is out there. This can help you focus if you're playing an instrument, if you're performing in sports, if you're taking a test. So anything where there's high pressure, whatever high pressure is to you, this can help you with that. Okay. So Vic and Rick. Now I know some of you remember me talking about this. So what does the V stand for? VIC. The IC is the same thing in both of these. But if you're making a presentation, there's something that you want to focus on that is leading up to the presentation as well as during the presentation. And the first thing that you want to think about starts with a V. Type that into the chat box. I'm going to step around and just take a look and see what you type in. What do you think that V stands for in Vic? It's something that you want to focus on. And this is all going to come together for you soon. It's something you want to focus on, especially while you're presenting your information. Something you want to focus on. It starts with a V. What do you think it is? Let me just shoot over to my desk and see what some of you say. Okay, someone says, okay, Kareem, so I think you've heard this before, right? Visualize, value, very focused. Okay, someone said value, impact, clarity. That's it, Kareem, you got it. If I had a prize, I would give it to you. But great job, great job. Value, impact, and clarity. Now, if you have questions and you put them into the question and answer box, don't worry, I'm gonna get to that towards the end. I'll leave some time, okay? So make sure that you stick with me so you can hear the answers to my questions, which can be very educational in and of itself. Value, impact, and clarity here. We'll get to the R in just a little bit. Value. Now, why is this so important? Let me share with you. So making sure that you focus on value, impact, and clarity before and during a presentation or an interview, doesn't matter. Making sure you keep your focus on that is a pattern of thinking that you can develop. It's a habit. So I've developed a pattern and habit of thinking about Vic and Rick. I'm doing a corporate training, and I've been doing one every other week. We've got 2 more coming up. They're about 3 hours and 45 minutes apiece. I had one last week. Actually, I have one more coming up, and then one Tuesday. This is a corporate training. It's a place that I used to work at. And I could allow myself to get distracted and think about, oh, I wonder what they're thinking about me. I wonder, am I doing a good job? I wonder if they're getting anything out of this. I wonder if they'll ever invite me back. I wonder if they'll give me a good referral. I hope I don't get nervous or anxious, right? So I could easily think about that, but I don't, because I've developed a habit or a pattern of focusing on what? On Vic. On Vic. So every time now, here comes a technique, here comes a strategy, right? So note this, write this down. This is really cool. Every time I find myself, and sometimes I think about it, right? Just kind of drift off a little bit sometimes. Every time I find myself getting distracted and thinking about anything else, anything negative, like, oh, I wonder what they're thinking. I wonder, am I doing a good job? Every time I find myself thinking about that, what do? I snap my attention back to Vic. I snap my attention back to Vic every time. So if it happens 10 times, I snap my attention back 10 times. If it happens 5 times. So here's what happens to people. Sometimes you learn something and then you try it once, right? So all of a sudden, let's say you have a presentation coming up or an interview, and you find, which is quite normal, we're all going to be a little anxious and nervous. So you find yourself thinking about, I hope this doesn't happen, right? So you're thinking about that. And then they say, oh, okay, I remember Michael Williams, or I read something in the book and they said to think about this. So then you think about that. And all of a sudden, here comes those thoughts again. So it drifts, it pulls you off, right? You start drifting and you say, okay, well, okay, let me just try to think about Vic again. Let me try to think about this. So you think about that. And then it comes again. And it's so powerful, it just keeps pulling you off track, keeps getting you distracted. And so then some people just give into it and they allow themselves to go with that train of thinking, to just drift off into this worrying and anxiousness. Has that ever happened to you? Does that make sense? What you must do is, until you develop a habit of thinking this like virtually all the time, you have to keep snapping your attention back, keep snapping it back 10 times, 20 times, 50 times, 100 times, every time, keep snapping it back. So what do? Well, before I have a speaking event or before I have a workshop or a training or something, I just keep thinking about the value that I want to give, that I want to share with my audience. This has a compounding effect, right? Some of you who've been working with me know that I've done this before in one of my videos. And when you're modeling me, I always crack up when I see people do it. but it has a compounding effect, right? When you focus, when you shift, you snap your focus back to Vic, especially the V, what are you doing? You're thinking about the value. So let's define value. What do we mean when we say value? What we mean is value from really two perspectives, primarily one, but two. And that is what's valuable to my audience? What's valuable to the interviewer? What's valuable to the person that I'm speaking with, that I'm talking to, I'm sharing with? What's valuable to them? And for those of you that have the Pro 90 speech system, you'll have heard me talk about in the proactive presentation system, how you prepare yourself for a presentation or an interview. In fact, I'm going to do a whole thing on interviewing, but you think about what are the questions that person has? What do they think? What do they want to know? What do they need to know? Right? You think you anticipate, okay, they want to know this, they need to know that. And then if I give them this piece of information, what questions might they have about that? And then if I answer that question, what questions might they have? So you anticipate, can't anticipate all, right? You anticipate most. Think about this. Okay. They think about that. They want to know this. They want to know how to do this, when to do this, where to do this, who uses this, why they want to do it, right? So you anticipate the questions, and then you either uh, articulate, you think about the answers, or you research, right? You get the answers, and then you prepare yourself. Every time, now watch this, listen, every time you think about Vic, you're literally preparing yourself for that presentation or interview. Think about that. So every time you get distracted and you snap your attention back to the V and Vic, you're preparing yourself for that presentation. So if you have to do it 100 times, well, you've just had 100 practice sessions for your presentation, right? And what begins to happen is that you no longer really get distracted. You don't get distracted that much. You just focus now on Vic. You focus on the V. You just keep thinking about the value. What is it that I want to give to them? What questions do I want to answer? How do I want to help them? How can I make this more valuable? What information do I need to research? What questions do I need to answer? And you keep spinning that around in your head and you keep finding the answers, right? So what happens is you're practicing and you're preparing to give them great value. And so if you focus your attention on giving them the greatest value that you can, what that means is that you are then not simultaneously focused on, I hope I don't get stuck. I hope I don't get stuck on this word. I hope I don't stutter. What are they thinking about me? That's not helpful at all, right? That's not going to help you at all. But if you focus on the value, that is going to help you and it's going to help your audience. So I said there's two aspects to this. One is anticipating what your audience, what's important to them, what's valuable to them. But another aspect is what's important to you, right? Because when you're communicating, you want to focus on something that you're passionate about in as much as possible, in as much as possible. So if it's important to you, if it's valuable to you and you're passionate about it and it's valuable to your audience, then you get maximum value because now people can tell when you're passionate about something, right? And they can tell when you're just giving them a bunch of information that you're not, it might be important, but you're not passionate about it. You can see it. So you want to be able to talk about something, to give people information that you're passionate about. Ordering coffee, maybe you're passionate about the mocha chocolate venti or something, right? But you want to make sure that you're passionate about that value that you're giving. Okay. Does that make sense? Snap your attention back every time you're preparing and you're also keeping your mind focused on what it should be focused on, right? Let's look at the I. The I. Okay. So let's just go here. I'm just going to give you this. Let's talk about, oops, all right. So we're talking about value, right? Talking about value. Now we're going to talk about impact. Okay, and then we'll get to the third one in just a moment, right? So we're talking about value, impact, and then the next one is clarity. So impact, what do we mean when we say impact? Again, snap your attention back to this. Impact, we're talking about you want to engage the person, engage the interviewer, or engage the people who are sitting around the table. You don't have to be standing up. Say you're sitting and you want to engage them when you're asking a question, when you're giving a present, when you're giving your report, when you're doing a presentation, when you're on the phone, you want to engage them with your voice and your content, right? Because I know a lot of you do phone conferences. So you want to engage them, you want to impact them. What do we mean when we say impact? We mean you want them to hang with you, right? To stick with you. You don't want them drifting off, looking on their phone, searching the internet, doing Snapchats, right? You know, while while they're there with you, they're supposed to be listening, tuned into you. You don't want them doing all kinds of other things. How do you do this? This comes down primarily, but not only, but primarily with your speaking style, right? The Pro 90 speech system is designed to help you with two basic or two important dimensions or aspects of your speech. One is the psychological, the other is the physical. So we're kind of talking about psychological, but now let's shift a little into physical, your speaking style. So you've heard me talk about this before. There are many job requirements. There are many positions, some of which are technical, many positions that require you to speak with voice inflection. Why is this? Why would a job that's maybe a technical job require or prefer someone that's able to speak with voice inflection, that has excellent communication skills, right? You'll see that more often. Excellent communication skills, the ability to articulate your thoughts clearly, the ability to engage an audience and hold attention. You'll probably see that. Why is that important? If you just need to be a technical person, you need to be really good at what you do. You also need to be good at communicating, all right? It's important because you can be brilliant, but if you're a really poor communicator, then it's hard for people to follow you. It's hard for them to get all of that brilliance that's in your head. It's hard for them to get it and to be able to use it and do something with it. It's not impossible. There are many brilliant people who are not great speakers, right? But it's probably not something that you want to take the chance of doing, right? If you can improve your communication skills, why not? This can particularly apply to people where I'm speaking in English right now, but for people where English is your second language, maybe you've been speaking English for a long time. I work with a lot of people from India. I mean, a lot of people from India and people from different parts of the Middle East and Africa and more and more Americans now, North Americans, more and more South Americans, people que habla español, right? And so if you speak multiple languages, which many, if not most of my clients speak multiple languages, then one of the things that you'll need to focus on is learning to, here's a couple of things, slow down and articulate. Technically, it's enunciate, but we like to use the word articulate, and articulate clearly. Articulate what you're saying clearly. So the I for impact means you want to be able to hold their attention. If you're speaking monotone, people are going to drift off. They're just not going to listen. If you're speaking too fast, they're going to say, I didn't understand what the person just said. And then they're going to be lost and they're going to be confused. And that's going to be frustrating. I want you to just think about where we're going with this. We're talking about what should I be thinking about when I'm speaking, when I'm presenting, or when I'm doing an interview, or when I'm giving information in a meeting, whatever it is, right? We're not talking about conversations yet, but this can apply to. So you want to be thinking impact. I want to make sure I hold their attention so that they can hear clearly what I've said, and they're able then to take action on it. The action could be just, aha, I got the information I need. Now I can go do what I need to do. I can go write my report. I can I can say yes to the order. I can say, yes, I want to buy this product, or I can do whatever I need to do, but I can take action because I understood what you said. So they need to be able to understand. They need to be able to hear you. If you're speaking too low and too soft, if you're speaking too loud, sometimes, right, it's a lot of noise, right? It's filter. If you are speaking too fast, they won't be able to understand. So they'll be like, I need the person to repeat themselves. Uh, if you have a heavy, heavy accent and they can't understand, I work with people that have accents. And while this isn't an accent reduction program, it can help with that. Why? Because when you learn how to slow down and articulate and take your time, Even if and when you have an accent, you can still speak clearly. You can still have impact. Impact. You can engage the audience. So, what do you want to do? You want to make sure that when you are speaking, you're focused also on impact, right? So, how do you do that? Well, some of you, when you're speaking, you've had a tendency to look off, right? And often people who have struggled with their speech, they look down, they often look up, they look someplace else because it's kind of embarrassing to look in someone's face. Sometimes it puts more pressure. And if you're stuttering, you don't want to see the person looking at you. So, one of the things that can help you actually be more conscious and mindful of how you're speaking is to look that person in the face, look at them in their eyes. Now, again, and I always say this, you don't want to like stare at the person like this, right? You don't want to do that. What you want to do is you want to just make regular and pretty strong, significant eye contact. And when I say strong, again, I'm not talking about staring. I'm just you want to make eye contact with the person. It's okay to look off and think, say a few things, and you want to bring the eye contact back, right? You want to keep bringing it back to that person. You actually, when you do that, it can actually improve your speech. You can feel more confident. It builds trust. If someone's looking all over the place, it's a little harder to trust them. If they're looking at you, as they say, the eyes are the windows to the soul. You kind of get a better feel for who they are. Interviewers will tell you that too. Is the person looking me in my eyes, or are they looking all over the place? So impact, make sure you're making good eye contact. And when you make good eye contact, you can read the person or the audience and you can say, okay, hmm, am I losing them? Are they following me? Right? And then you can adjust how you're speaking, how fast, how slow, how well you're articulating. Do I need to go back and explain this again? Right? Sometimes I'm even uh, doing a presentation and I can hear a person go like that. I can hear them breathe or hear them like this. And I'll go, yes. Right. And sometimes they didn't have this. Oh, no, I was just touching my hair. This actually happened last week. I saw a young lady was sitting there and I was talking about something and it looks like she had a question. She's like, and I said, oh, yes. And she said, oh, no, I was just fixing my hair. But often I can see someone and I know that they have a question. They want to say something. Maybe they have a comment. And I go, yes, go ahead. And I go, yeah, I was just thinking, right? So you want to stay tuned in to your audience. Okay. Impact. Impact. So let's talk about now clarity. And I hope this is helpful for you. Hope this is worth the time that you're spending here today. I can tell you that all of this content that I'm giving you today, these strategies and techniques and things to think about are, and again, you can go and do the research. It's just rock solid and it works. It absolutely works. This is all very practical, actionable, relevant stuff. This is not theoretical. If you apply this, it will work. In the work that I do with people, I can't give them theoretical stuff. It's got to work. It has to work, or else I wouldn't stay in business, right? I wouldn't be in business, wouldn't help people improve their speech, smooth out their speech. People who stutter, it can take a little longer than what we'd like, but I wouldn't be able to be in business helping people and getting results. I mean, I'm going to share with you some successes that we've been having in our Slack group. Slack is a communications tool. It's where I have all my coaching clients, all my current coaching clients, and some previous. And you should just see the successes pouring in. That wouldn't happen if this stuff didn't work. So take it from me, this really works. And actually, it's not clarify, it's clarity. So this is a T. So that's so clarity. What do we mean when we say clarity? What we mean is you want to make sure that what you're saying is clear. We kind of talked about this in the I, right? But it's clear. And there are two aspects to this clarity. One is your speaking style, right, where we talked about impact, making sure that you're speaking in a way that engages. Here, clarity. Am I speaking slow enough? If I have an accent, am I articulating and taking my time? It's okay to do that. Then the second dimension is structure. Is what I'm saying structured in such a way that people can follow it? Which means Clarity, greater clarity. Is it structured? So in the proactive presentation system, which is a part of the Pro 90D speech system, the mobile self-study, the ultimate version, not the basic version, and the ultimate version, and obviously you get all of this in coaching when I work with you one-on-one, we talk about a structure that you can use to present your thoughts and ideas clearly, right? Clearly. And I'll just share this quickly with you. I won't go into detail. So the basic structure has to do with questions and answers, categories, and numbers. So I'll just give you an example. So there are two major parts or categories or sections in the Pro 90 speech system. One has to do with questions and answers. The other part has to do with categories and numbers. So that was an example of categories and numbers, right? There are two major parts, questions and answers, categories and numbers, right? So I just delineated, enumerated, there's two categories, two major parts, sections, whatever it is. When you use this strategy, you can use this even in meetings, you can use it in interviews, you can use it in presentations. What it does is it helps you crystallize and, yes, clarify what you're going to say. And it helps the listener follow what you're going to say. Oh, he said that there's two. So if you say that there are two things, what does the person automatically begin to think? What do they think? They think, oh, there's two. I wonder what they are. Okay, then you give them the first one. And I've had people do this because every now and then you're doing a webinar or something, training, and you forget to give them the second one or the third one. And I'll have people say, well, what's the second one? What's the third one, right? Because they're waiting, they're anticipating. So you build a sense of anticipation. Here's the first one, here's the second one. When you build a sense of anticipation, it means you are impacting them. You have their attention. Okay. So this helps on many different levels. So what's the second one? You give them the second one. So now you don't have to talk all around in circles and talk about all kinds of different things and not knowing if you were clear, if you were precise, if you were concise, because you had two things that you wanted to give them. You can expand, but you know, I'm only going to give them two things, not 10 or 20, or not knowing how many I gave them. All right. Does that make sense? So this is very important to understand this idea of clarity, both in style. I want to make sure you can hear me. I want to make sure I'm speaking slow enough and make sure that I'm articulating or enunciating. The other thing that I want to do is I want to make sure that I'm speaking to you or giving you information in a clear structure. Okay, a clear structure. That is Vic. So what do you do? When you have an upcoming presentation or interview, you keep snapping your attention back to Vic. And every time you kind of run through these, just think about the time it's going to take you to run through value. Is this valuable? What would be more valuable for my audience? So you ask yourself, what would be of most value to my audience? What would be what information? So keep asking yourself that. If you ask yourself that, you don't have time to think about anything else. Impact. How can I make sure I'm speaking clearly? So you record yourself, you practice, you do it in front of other people. And then clarity, right? You want to make sure that I'm speaking clear. So how can I structure this so it's crystal clear? All right, let's talk, and then we're going to get to some questions. Let's talk now about Rick. And Rick is virtually the same. In fact, I'm not going to use a whole nother page for Rick. But Rick, we use, if you remember the thing I said in the beginning, Rick is used for relevancy. Relevancy. Rick is used for relevancy. Okay, so this applies more to conversations. We're having a conversation, and I want to make sure that, and this could be casual conversation, I want to make sure that what I'm saying is relevant to this conversation. So if you and I are talking about sports, and then all of a sudden I start talking about something else without having a transition, I just jump off and start talking about politics, right? Unless it's politics or sport, then there's disjuncture there, right? So I want to make sure that whatever you're talking about, if it's a conversation, that you're relevant to what's going on, right? And what that does is that it allows you to stay focused on the moment. So let's talk about being present. Being present. This is pretty important. So I want you to follow me here. Are you listening? One of the challenges that many people have is to stay present in the moment, and they start thinking about other things, right? But if you can be present, almost empty out your mind and just be there in the moment. Don't start thinking about what you're going to say, how you're going to respond. Oh, I want to say this, or oh, I hope I don't get stuck on that. You're just there, just taking in what the other person's saying, watching that other person, just tuned in, right? Then when it's time for you to respond, you just trust that you're going to say the right thing. You don't think about how you're going to speak. You just speak without thinking or speak while you think. Right? You don't have to think and then speak in most cases. Trust me, you don't. You can speak without thinking or you can speak while thinking. And so you're just present there, you're absorbing the information, they're talking, there's a nice ebb and flow, a give and take because you're present. When you're not present, or you're inside your own head thinking about yourself, what are they thinking of me? I hope I don't get stuck. How do I look? How do I sound? Oh, I'm getting, and you start thinking all those things, then you're not present. And that's when you're most likely to get stuck. So let's talk just about the power. Remember, I talked about this all the way in the beginning. We're talking about the power of really being present and of using your thoughts, channeling your train of thinking to go where you want it to go. So when we allow ourselves to become distracted, right, to become distracted with all these other thoughts that we've talked about, what we're doing is we're using the power of our mind to actually hurt us, to diminish and reduce the impact and the power of our conversations, of our communication. And the reason we're doing it is because when you think about not stuttering, when you think about the words that you might get stuck on, when you think about how what others might think of you, or what happens if I do get stuck, then what will they think, and when you think about that, what you're actually doing is you're emotionalizing and you're visualizing it. So remember, when you think about those things, your brain has to say, what is it that we're thinking about here? Oh, we're thinking about stuttering. I'm thinking about this word that I used to get stuck on. Well, what is this word and what does it feel like when we get stuck? When did we get stuck last? Right? Your brain is doing this very, very quickly. It says, oh yeah, it's our name, or it's this word, it's the name of this. And then because I've actually watched people when we talk about how they got stuck on something, their speech actually begins to diminish a little bit. Okay. So it brings up that the emotions, the feelings, it brings up an image of what it felt like to get stuck. So every time you let yourself, now listen to this is so powerful. Every time you let yourself think about all of that, you're simply practicing it, you're rehearsing it, you're saying that you really want it to happen. Oh, I want to get stuck. Oh, I know you're like, no, I don't want to get, well, every time you think about it, that's exactly what you're doing. You're saying, oh, I want to think about this. I want to emotionalize. I want to feel, I want to re-experience getting stuck on this, right? Whether you get stuck or not, you don't want to think about it. You don't want to visualize it. You don't want to emotionalize it. You don't want to talk about it. Yeah, you might get stuck, but you don't want to enhance that experience. You don't want to make that happen, right? By thinking about it. So what you do then is you control that train of thinking by thinking about Vic or Rick, right? You think about Vic or Rick. Think about something more constructive. And then you use the power of your mind to ask yourself, well, how can I make this more valuable? How can I make sure I'm engaging and have impact? How can I make sure this is crystal clear? And you just keep asking yourself those questions while you're presenting, while you're speaking. Does that make sense? So some things that where we see this happening, I mean, I've seen some of these things happening, which has allowed my clients and students to speak more smoothly and confidently. I've seen this happen just over the last couple of weeks. I have a young lady, and you're going to be seeing some video, some kind of really more educational videos where some of my coaching clients are going to be sharing what they've been doing, how they've prepared, and what the impact has been. So one guy, you've probably seen this video, his name is Arnab, and Arnab just successfully defended his PhD. We started working together almost 4 months ago. And he said, I mean, he'll share this in a new video that we have coming out. But he just said he felt so confident, so relaxed. Of course, he's a little anxious, right? And he visualized for like 30 minutes before the event. And he even went to the room and he practiced. And he was just so much in control. He knew everything. He said, I knew every word that was coming out and how I wanted it to come out, how I wanted it to impact the audience. Not in an anticipatory, not in a negative way. He just could feel the flow. He could feel the words and he could control how it came out. And he was able to impact and stay tuned to his audience when he was giving his doctoral dissertation, when he was defending it. He said he did an excellent job. Another young lady that I'm working with, and you'll see a video of her. And she's just said yesterday that she was so excited that she was actually in tears a little bit because she had to do an online video presentation for an online class. And she said she was just so smooth and so confident. And Vicky's come a long way. I mean, she she used to really kind of struggle with that. And now if you see her, she's speaking so much smoother. What I do is I teach people how to be their own speech coach. I don't want you dependent on me forever. I want to teach you within 3 or 4 months to be your own speech coach so that when we're done, you can continue to coach yourself to not just getting up to par or getting up to being okay. I want you to become a superior speaker, right? Remember, again, you probably heard me say this, but if you're in an interview, uh, you could be working already, but you want to move up, you want to start your own business, whatever it is that you want to do, you don't get points. You don't necessarily get the job for not stuttering, for not being a stutterer, right? That's treatment. Okay, well, you'll be able to do okay. You'll be able to survive. You'll do well, right? No, you're not going to get points for not stuttering. You're going to get points for being an excellent, superior speaker. So if you got two people who are equally qualified, and one person doesn't stutter, and the other person is an excellent speaker, equally qualified, who's going to get the job? Who's going to get the promotion? Who's going to get the attention? The more articulate you are, the more attention you're going to get. People are going to say, wow, this person has valuable input. Who's going to get the attention? Who's going to get the rewards? The person who's the most articulate, right? The person who speaks the smoothest, has the greatest confidence. You know yourself. You see people. I had a client just say this the other day. I see people get promoted and they're not that competent, but they're pretty confident and they're very articulate. And so they got the job. I'm more competent, but because of speech or whatever, fears, then I didn't apply for a job. I don't apply for the job or whatever. So you don't get points for not stuttering. You get points for being an excellent speaker. The Pro 90 speech system, using these kinds of strategies, equips you to become a superior speaker, an awesome or an amazing speaker. So you want to, and a part of it comes down to what you focus on. Okay. I have people who are doctors, ophthalmologists, dentists, entrepreneurs, people that I'm working with, engineers, and they are just telling me week after week, sometimes day after day, oh man, I had this meeting and it was awesome. Nobody's saying I'm 100%. Some people say I was almost 100%, I was 90% or whatever. I'm not 100% fluent right now. Right? No one's 100. You may think, oh, wow, Mike's 100% fluent. No one's 100% fluent 100% of the time. That's not the goal here. The goal is not for you to become 100% fluent 100% of the time. Everyone stumbles. Everyone has disfluencies. What it is that you want to become smooth and confident. You want to become smooth, clear, and confident, right? So that you can articulate with great value. You can give great value, great impact, great clarity. Or when you're conversing, it's very relevant to that person. You're conversing, it's relevant, it's something that person wants to talk about, and you're having an impact. The person's listening to you, and it's clear. The person doesn't have to ask you to repeat yourself, right? So these are all things that you can do. So I want to invite you to do a couple of things. Number one, there are those of you out there who will be watching this video for many years to come. As long as I'm still alive and still around, I want to invite you to visit our website, pro90d.com. And when you're ready to take your speech to the next level, often it's going to require you to get some accountability, right? Some of you are going to take this information and run with it. And I hear people write me back, oh, I did this and I really improved my speech a lot, but I'm kind of stuck. I've plateaued. I need to take my speech to the next level. What that means is that you're going to want to work with myself or someone like me to help you go to the next level. I want you to just tune in and then we're going to answer some questions. So somebody says, well, Michael, now you're getting ready to advertise your coaching. Well, what I'm doing is I'm going to invite you to set up a conversation with me. I know there are people out there who want to take their speech to the next level. I've been seeing so many successes with my clients that it's not a mistake. All right. I've been doing this for a while now. This is a systematic process. It's something you can trust. I have people from all over the world, highly educated people. I got 2 PhDs I'm working with. I have 3 doctors. So you can look and say, well, how do we know this works? Well, if they think it works and if it's working for them, for sure it's going to freaking work for you too, right? Well, how do we know we can trust you? I'm giving you all this money. Well, if they trust me, so how do we know that's even true? Well, at some point, you got to trust, right? That's why I give away a lot of free stuff. You try it for yourself. You don't have to believe me. You don't have to believe anyone else. Try it for yourself. If it works for you, the free stuff, then you know it's going to work for you if you take it to the next level. So that means there's a few advantages, and I'm going to say really 5 advantages to working with me personally. Number one is acceleration, right? If you work by yourself, I've seen it take people sometimes 10 times as long, 10 times as long to get to the same place as when they're working with me or with a coach. And the reason is because of distraction and discouragement. We get distracted with family, we get distracted with work, we get frustrated, distracted, or this because we get, oh, all my clients go through a dip. They could start out, they do really well, then there's usually a dip, and then they come back up and they just keep going. So if this happens to you, are you going to give up and quit? A lot of people do. They kind of give up. Or I see people do so well that then they take the foot off the accelerator and they start to roll back some, right? So coaching accelerates your progress. It can cut the time by as little as 10 times. So in 3 months, I can get to a place where it's taken a lot of people 2 years, I mean, 2 years, a year, 2 years, 3 years, right? Working on their own. Acceleration, accountability, big one. Many of my clients come to me because of accountability. They need someone to hold them accountable. So when you come, you're going to be accountable to me. And I'm going to make sure you're doing things every week. I can't make you do it. Make sure you're doing things every week. You paid your money, so you're committed, right? Accountability. Third thing is evaluation. I give you evaluation. My clients always say, so how am I doing? How am I doing, Michael? So I give you evaluation. Here's where I see you're at. Here's what you need to work on. Evaluation, feedback, right? Here's what you need to do. So some of you've heard about the 80-20 rule, Pareto principle. What that says is that, and this works in this process, we're going to find the 20%, sometimes it's 10, right? The 20% that is the 2 things, the 1 thing skill that you need to work on that's going to give you 80 to 90% of your results. So what we do is I can look at you and say, okay, we need to work on this and this, and we focus on this and this, right? This and this. We focus on that. And once we get that, then we move on to the next 20%. Okay, now let's focus on this. So working on your own, sometimes you won't know what that is, right? How would you know? How could you know? I know because I've seen patterns over the last several years, right? So I know, okay, you need to work on this. So you get evaluation, feedback, and you get encouragement. People want to give up. People want to quit. Is this really working? Uh-oh, here's another program. I tried it, I got results. Then I started to regress. Well, everyone regresses to a certain degree. You just have to stick in there and keep doing. You're building your brain, you're building new patterns, you're rewiring your brain. It takes time and effort. It must be frustrating. It has to be frustrating, right? And it can be exciting as well, right? It is exciting to watch yourself, but it's going to be frustrating. That's the sensation of you developing a new skill, creating new habits. So you get those 5 things. Acceleration. It's just a question, how quickly do you want to get there? You want to take 6 months, a year, 2 years, or do you want to get there in a few months? I've seen people, man, go from severe stuttering to minimal, right? Minimal in a couple of months. And then in 4 or 5 months, wow, it's just a totally different person. I've seen people make this transformation in just a couple of months, 2 or 3 months. They've been struggling with this for decades, 2 decades, 3 decades. Okay. So You get the encouragement. So I just want to invite you. I'm not inviting you to join the coaching, right? I'm inviting you to set up an assessment session to see if it's a good fit for you or me. I don't want to work with people who are not serious. I generally don't like to work with high school students, but there's the occasional one who comes in and they're very serious. They do a good job. I don't necessarily like working a lot with college students because sometimes they're not as focused and as serious, but there's the occasional one. Some of my best clients have been college students. I like working with professionals who are adult, where you're professionally minded, you're ready to take your speech to the next level. You're serious, you understand it's going to take work, it's going to take time. You know that 2 or 3 months is not going to be it and then you're done. You know, 2 or 3 months is going to completely revolutionize and transform your life. But you know, you're going to have to keep working after that, not to just get up to par, but to really continue to build superior speech, right? So those are the people I want to work with. I want to work with the the high speed, the elite, the people who are ready to do the next level. Okay. And so those of you who have been watching this and all of my other webinars, you'll notice the high quality of content because I want you to get results, experience it for yourself. For some of you, this is all you'll need. For others of you, you'll want to take it to the next level. So I'll send you a link where you can take a look at our coaching program and decide if you're ready to accelerate your career and take your professional life and personal life to the next level. So let's do a quick review, and then I'm going to answer some questions. Okay, just take a look at the time here. Great, a couple more minutes, and then I'll sit down and take questions for about the next 15 or 20 minutes. Two things. I had two friends whose names were Vic and Rick. They helped me improve my speech by teaching me this really, really cool trick. They said when you're presenting to keep your focus on Vic, and when you're having conversations, shift your focus to Rick. Okay. So Vic, the V stands for what? Value. The I stands for impact. The C stands for clarity. Rick, relevancy. Is this relevant? Impact, clarity. Remember, you ask yourself, aha, how can I bring more value? How can I give my audience or these people more value? How can I impact them so that they're paying attention, right? The way that I'm speaking. How can I make this clear? Am I speaking too fast? Am I speaking too slow? Am I modulating my voice? How can I make this clear by the structure that I use to structure what it is that I'm going to say? The same thing here. Relevancy, is it relevant? Is it relevant to the person that I'm speaking to? Okay. So you want to make sure that you do that. How do you do it before and in the situation? You snap yourself back. You find yourself drifting, thinking about those other things. It's very simple. You remember Vic or Rick and you snap your attention back and you start rolling through each of these letters. How can I get more value? How can I make sure? How can I do this? And just by virtue of shifting your focus and asking yourself those questions, you simply cannot be thinking and worried about these other things. That's the essence of the strategy. You can't think about two things at the same time. You have to be focused on one thing or the other. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to shift over, switch the video over so I can sit at my desk and just answer some questions for you. Okay, and so I want you to check your email because I'm going to be sending you a link. And yeah, cool. All right, hope you're still with me. Let's shift this video over. Okay, so now let me get in here, answer some. All right, so let's see if anyone has any questions here. What do you do, or what did you used to do when you found yourself spiraling down into a bad speech patterns again after months of speaking well? Okay, great question. Let me go ahead and answer that. So what do you do when you've been speaking well and then you spiral down? One of the things you want to do is you want to ask yourself, what's going on here? Is there anything happening that's triggering this? Uh, am I getting enough rest? One of my clients says, you know what? I'm not drinking as much. In fact, I'm not drinking any coffee now. And they've been feeling more relaxed and their speech has improved. Am I drinking too much caffeine, too much sugar? Am I getting enough rest? Is there anything emotional or relational going on? Relationship issues can put a drain, can impact your speech. Is there something bothering you in your relationships? Is there something bothering you in your finances, right? That so then if there's something bothering you, then you say, what can I do about this? Because it's going to linger and it's going to pull on your speech. So then you say, what can I do about it? And when you start thinking about actions you can take, maybe you can't leave the situation, maybe you can't make people pay you money. What can I do to increase or improve my income? What can I do to change my relationship? What can I do to improve my health? And then you start doing it. When and I'm telling this is exactly what I do. When you start to do that, you feel more empowered, you feel more confident, and you'll notice your speech starts to improve. So you ask yourself that. If it's none of that, and you see your speech start spiraling, then you say, okay, have I been consistently working on my speech? Do I have a daily routine, or have I just used some tricks and tips here or there? And my speech got better. And then I felt like, okay, I'm done. I'm good. Right. And then the next thing you know, a month or two later, it spirals down again. This is a skill. You got to keep developing it. Right. It doesn't mean you have to stay in the pronoun speeches for the rest of your life, but you get it. You build the skill and then you keep sharpening and making the skill better and better by actual use. It's not just practicing modeling. You got to get out there and use it constantly. So it's going to be one of those things. Either person hasn't had a regular routine that they've stuck with long enough to build the habit, to build the skill, to make it automatic, or there could be something else going on in the person's life that's pulling on their speech that they need to work on. Okay. So I hope that answered your question. Yes, that's happened to me. And immediately I address whatever it is and my speech gets better. Okay. When I anticipate my turn coming to speak in a meeting, you feel so nervous. Yes, we talked about that, right? So, what do you want to think about? Well, you don't want to anticipate your turn coming. At least you don't want to do that negatively. You might want to just tune in to what everyone else is saying. Uh, you might want to say, okay, my turn's coming, so I'll just use some introductory words. I don't have to say my name the same way everyone else says it. I'll use some introductory words, and that's it. And then you just tune into what everyone else, you listen to their name, you smile, you be present. Then when your turn comes, you pause, you take your time, you use those introductory words. If you get a little stuck, that's okay. Just use some other introductory and you just let it come out, right? But you take your time, you go super slow. You may say, "Oh, that doesn't work." Trust me, it does work. If you try it enough, I've got so many people who do this. I do it myself just because it's a habit now, but it absolutely works. You can hear me talk about this. In fact, if you take even my free course, the Ultimate Smooth Speech Package, if you don't have that, visit my website. But I'll also send a link. And there was a link that I emailed you earlier to register for this webinar, the Ultimate. It's in there. Okay, so that will help you. So you don't want to just sit and think about, oh, I'm going to get stuck. You think about how you're going to say it, and then you just tune in to what everyone else is saying. Okay, so I have a problem with phone interviews because you miss the vision with whom you're talking to. In the middle of the conversation, I lose track of where I am because the person is not in front of me. Yeah, that can be challenging. One of the things you want to do in a phone interview is make sure your hands free so you can use your hands. If you don't use your hands, you want to work on using your hands when you speak. You also want to sometimes people can actually move around. They can actually get up and move around in an interview when they're on the phone. Moving can also help you instead of staying stiff and still. And then you might just try to visualize the person that you're talking to. Also, make sure that you're smiling when you're talking on the phone, smiling. Smiling affects you, it impacts you, and it impacts the listener. They can tell that you're smiling. So smile, relax, use your hands, move around if you can. Try to visualize the person. Okay. I hope that that helps. All right. So your ability or inability to live up to the ideal version of yourself that you desire to reach may affect your speech. In other words, if you aren't living up to your best self, could that be hampering speech? Yes, it can. Because if you know that you're not doing what you could do, then you start to feel bad, you start to feel guilty, and that can impact your speech. Now, I don't think many of us live up to our ideal, like we're not absolutely 100% exactly where we need. There are some people, right? So I'm not saying no one. I'm just saying, we're not all doing everything that we want to do, that we should do and could do. But if you know that you're doing your best, I mean, you know that you're really doing your best, you're doing some things, even if it's a little bit, right? You say, okay, I'm just going to do a little bit of this every day that's pointing me and moving me in the direction of my ideal self. Then you start building momentum, you start feeling good about yourself, right? So sometimes it's a matter of just taking very, very small steps and moving in that direction. That can be extremely helpful. And then you'll start to feel better. If you know you're not doing anything or you haven't been sticking with it, then that can impact you. Absolutely. How to practice interview conversation with yourself. So what you do is you pretend that you're in an interview. You write down or you anticipate the questions they're going to ask you, and you act like you're answering those questions. Videotape yourself, watch yourself, listen to yourself, give yourself feedback as best you can. Find someone, if you can, with whom you can practice interviewing with. Okay. So in my Slack group with my coaching clients, they practice all kinds of different things with each other. So awesome community. Um, so you just practice what you would say in an interview. You put yourself in that environment. You kind of experience, you act like, you emotionalize, you visualize, you put yourself in the interview and you can feel it. What does it look like? What does it sound like? How does it feel? And then you respond with the answers that you would be giving in an actual interview. Okay. If you practice that enough, you'll get it. Visualizing. One of my clients said he visualized before an interview or whatever. That can help as well. All right. Last question. Excuse me. Isn't value and impact the same? If you express something valuable, isn't it going to have an impact by itself? Great question. So all of these are overlapping, right? You'll see impact and clarity are very similar, value, impact, clarity, but we can distinguish them. So if something is valuable, absolutely, it can have a great impact. But just because something is valuable, just because you're saying something of value, it doesn't mean necessarily it's going to have an impact, because perhaps your speaking style or a person's speaking style is such that, say, it's monotone, extremely valuable information, but it's monotonous. So it's not engaging the people who are listening. Does that make sense? So, yeah, we got to have value, but we also have to have impact in speaking style, right? And we have to have clarity in speaking style and structure. So they overlap, but they can be distinguished. I hope that that answered your question. Okay, good. So let's see if there's anything else. Any other questions or comments? Thanks to everyone who's logged in here, and there are some people who are logging in on YouTube. Um, yeah, let's see if there's anything over there. Great, then we're going to go ahead and wrap up. If you have registered, I'll be sending you out a link to my free course, the Ultimate Smooth Speech Package. If you're not in that, make sure that you get into it. It's awesome. I'm hearing great things about that course. And I'll be sending you a link to to set up an assessment session with me for those of you, for the few of you who are ready to take your speech to the next level. You've been playing around with this long enough. Now you're ready to get serious. So I'll send you a link for that. All right. Thanks everyone so much who joined me today, and hope that you have a great rest of the weekend. Any other last comments or questions? Okay. Hope this was valuable for you, and check your email, check your spam and junk. I'm going to be sending you out a replay link. All right. So make sure that you check it for that, and then you'll be able to watch this and download it or whatever. Okay. So we'll see you all the next